My lords and members of the House of Commons, an increasingly dangerous and volatile world threatens the United Kingdom.
A single handwritten memo on the king's private stationery just changed everything inside the palace. One heavy velvet tray filled with historic diamonds was quietly removed from Queen Camilla's dressing room before dawn. King Charles has issued a direct, unappealable order to hand her most precious brooch collection over to Princess Catherine. Why did the king make this sudden move now? And what did Camilla discover inside his desk that triggered an immediate midnight confrontation? Stay with me, because the real reason for this tactical eviction is a secret the palace desperately tried to bury. The midnight eviction of the Windsor vaults. The morning of May 14th began at 5 o'clock for the staff at Windsor Castle. Royal jeweler David Thomas arrived at the subterranean vault entrance with 2 security guards. He held a signed warrant bearing the king's personal cipher. The heavy steel door took 3 minutes to unlock. Inside, Thomas went straight to row 4, shelf B. He lifted a vintage mahogany case lined with faded blue velvet. Inside sat 3 historic diamond pieces: the Tudor crown brooch, the Art Deco geometric diamond shield, and the Hesse ribbon bow. By 5:45, the case was loaded into an unmarked vehicle. It left the courtyard without headlights. These 3 specific items formed the core of Queen Camilla's public wardrobe. She wore the geometric shield to the opening of Parliament last autumn. The Tudor crown brooch was her preferred piece for state banquets. Royal ledger entries show these items are valued at over £12 million combined. They belong to the private collection of the sovereign. The removal occurred while the palace slept. Camilla's dressers discovered the empty spaces in her jewelry cabinet at 8 in the morning. A call went out to the master of the household within 10 minutes. The response from the king's private office was immediate. The transfer was authorized by the monarch himself. No further explanations were given to the queen's staff. This sudden collection shift follows a closed-door medical consultation. 2 days prior, a team of specialists spent 3 hours at Clarence House. They left through the garden gate to avoid photographers. Following that meeting, the king spent the evening alone in his study. He did not attend the scheduled family dinner. Instead, he drafted 3 private memos on his personal thick cream stationery. The vault warrant was the first of those documents. The second memo went directly to the palace's financial directors. It ordered a complete freeze on future jewelry modifications. For 20 years, consorts have adjusted older pieces to fit modern dresses. That practice is now officially over. The third memo remains locked in a safe at Windsor. Palace officials tried to minimize the incident by noon. They told senior reporters that the items were undergoing routine safety cleaning. That explanation collapsed by 1 o'clock. The chief restorer at the Windsor workshop told colleagues he had received no new work orders. The diamonds were already 5 miles away from the castle workshops. They were sitting on an oak table at Adelaide Cottage. Princess Catherine's staff had accepted the mahogany box at 6:30. The delivery log shows it was signed for by her personal security detail. Catherine did not open the box until her children left for school. Her head of the dresser was the only other person in the room. The tension between the 2 royal households has grown since January. Camilla has spent months organizing her personal legacy archives. She requested a full inventory of the Queen Mother's estate items in April. That request was delayed by the Treasury Office for 6 weeks. Now, the king's active intervention settles the debate without a single discussion. A specific detail in the warrant caught the vault guard's attention. The document did not use the standard administrative stamp. Charles wrote the instructions entirely by hand. The ink was the specific dark green color he uses only for urgent constitutional decisions. He signed it with his full sovereign signature, omitting the usual family initials. This break from routine suggests a deep institutional rush. Charles has spent the last month reviewing family trusts from the past 80 years. He hired an independent legal auditor from Edinburgh to check the private covenants. That auditor spent 4 days in the Windsor Library last week. He left with copies of the 1953 inheritance files. The sudden transfer of the diamond has created a quiet stir among the domestic staff. 2 of Camilla's senior dressers requested temporary reassignment to the London offices. They cited a highly stressful working environment at Clarence House. Meanwhile, the King's private secretary has scheduled an unscheduled meeting with the Prince of Wales for tomorrow afternoon. The true mystery lies in the timing of the order. The diplomatic calendar shows no major international events for another 3 weeks. There was no public reason to move £12 million worth of historic diamonds on a quiet Tuesday morning. The decision came from an internal calculation that the public cannot see. The public version of this story will likely involve a traditional loan narrative for an upcoming portrait session, but the internal logs tell a different story. The transfer document explicitly states that the move is permanent. There is no return date listed on the file. The registry entry for all 3 brooches has already been updated to list the Princess of Wales as the sole custodian. This move effectively strips Camilla of her visual authority at the next state occasion. She relies on these specific diamonds to project a sense of historical continuity. Without them, her wardrobe holds significantly less historical weight. The choice to move them now, under the cover of early morning security, shows that the king is prioritizing the next generation's image over current domestic harmony. The hidden covenants of the Queen Mother's will. A heavy legal binder sits open on a long oak table inside the archives of St. James's Palace. The date stamped on the first page is April 12, 1998. Family lawyers from the firm Ferrer & Co. arrived at 10 o'clock to review a sealed codicil. This document belongs to the private estate planning files of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The papers are bound in thick red ribbon and secured with wax seals. It took 40 minutes for the senior archivist to verify the signatures before the lawyers could read the contents. The document contains a specific directive known as the Designated Lineage Clause. The Queen Mother spent 3 weeks drafting this section with her advisors at Clarence House. The clause focuses entirely on the future custody of heirloom pieces inherited through the Bowes-Lyon family line. The text states that these specific assets must bypass any non-bloodline consort if the reigning monarch's health ever faces structural limitations. The definition of a structural limitation is defined as any long-term medical condition requiring regular specialist care. That exact legal definition applies to the king's current treatment, directly impacting the jewelry dispute. The 3 diamond brooches removed from Windsor Castle were originally purchased by the Queen Mother during the 1930s. She purchased the Art Deco geometric diamond shield from a London merchant in 1935 to celebrate her husband's accession. The piece contains over 200 small baguette-cut diamonds set in a platinum frame. The legal file shows that these items were never intended for permanent distribution among secondary family branches. The tension escalated when Queen Camilla discovered that the legal review was underway. Her personal attorney sent an urgent letter to the palace's financial director on May 16th. The letter requests clarification on the definition of the term non-bloodline consort. The response from the king's legal team took less than 24 hours to arrive. It stated that the clause applies to any individual who entered the family by marriage rather than birth. This definition directly excludes Camilla from long-term asset custody. The king acted on this legal advice while staying at Highgrove. On the evening of May 19th, he opened his private desk drawer in the ground floor library. Inside sat a leather-bound inventory ledger containing the private tracking numbers for the Bowes-Lyon diamonds. A junior aide saw the king comparing these numbers against the newly unsealed 1998 codicil. The king spent 3 hours verifying the acquisition dates of each stone before writing his final instructions. This discovery triggered an immediate midnight confrontation at the estate. Camilla entered the library at 11:45 after being informed of the ledger audit by a trusted staff member. The conversation lasted for 20 minutes behind closed doors. Staff in the hallway reported hearing the rustle of heavy document pages being moved across the desk. The king refused to pause the audit. He cited his obligation to the upcoming estate tax reviews scheduled by the Treasury Department. The estate tax battle provides the practical reason for this sudden enforcement. Under British law, transfers of property between a sovereign and the direct heir to the throne are exempt from standard inheritance taxes. Transfers to a spouse who is not in the direct line of succession are subject to different legal criteria. By moving the £12 million worth of diamonds to Princess Catherine now, the king avoids a future public audit of private royal wealth. The Treasury Department requires all asset transfers to be finalized 6 months before seasonal fiscal declarations. The legal files also reveal a mystery regarding a missing 4th stone. The original 1935 receipt for the Art Deco geometric shield lists an accompanying 3-carat canary diamond pendant drop. That pendant drop was missing from the mahogany box when the royal jeweler opened it at Windsor Castle. The registry records show the pendant drop was last signed out by a member of Camilla's immediate family during a charity event in 2024. This detail transformed a standard property transfer into a serious administrative crisis. The king's private secretary ordered an internal tracking audit of the missing stone on June 1st. The audit team focused on the restoration records of an offshore jewel firm based in Geneva. Camilla's household had utilized this firm for private maintenance work 2 years ago. The invoice files show the firm received 3 historic pieces for safety clasp reinforcement during that period. The palace security network has restricted access to the legal archive room since this audit began. Only 3 individuals hold the entry codes for the St. James's storage vaults. The king's private secretary has taken personal custody of the original 1998 codicil. It is now kept in a secure digital safe at Buckingham Palace. The move has altered the balance of power between the courtiers. The older generation of staff views the enforcement as a victory for institutional tradition. They have spent months resisting the modernization plans proposed by Camilla's private office. The sudden application of the 1998 clause shows that the original family rules still carry absolute authority. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine's legal representatives have remained completely silent during the process. They received a copy of the unsealed codicil via secure courier on June 4th. The document was accompanied by a short note from the king's personal solicitor. The note instructed her team to prepare for the formal integration of the Bowes Lyon assets into the main trust fund. This integration ensures that the pieces can never be sold or modified by future generations. The silent war inside Clarence House. The silver soup tureen remained covered throughout dinner on June 2nd. 3 footmen stood by the mahogany sideboard in the morning room at Clarence House. Queen Camilla sat at the northern end of the table. She reached for her small velvet evening bag on the adjacent chair and pulled out a set of small brass keys. These keys opened the secondary jewelry cache inside her private dressing room on the 1st floor. She handed them to her private secretary, Sophie Densham, with a short instruction to check the inventory slip for the Tudor crown brooch. Densham returned 7 minutes later without the jewelry case. Her hands were empty. Instead of speaking aloud, she placed a small square of paper next to the silver goblet of water. The paper was an internal palace transit slip, showing that the brooch had been checked out of the building at 4 o'clock that afternoon. The destination column listed Adelaide Cottage. The authorization field carried the signature of the master of the household. Silence dominated the table for the rest of the meal. Keeping his eyes firmly on his plate, the king offered no explanation for the missing piece. This silence confirmed the change in the household dynamic. Camilla's staff had spent the previous week preparing her wardrobe for the summer season, selecting that specific brooch for 3 separate events. Now, those plans had to be abandoned without warning. The physical transfer of the diamonds involved a direct confrontation outside the dressing room doors. At 3:30 that afternoon, 2 officers from the palace security detachment arrived at the 1st floor landing carrying a secure transport satchel. Camilla's head of security refused to grant them entry to the jewelry cabinet, citing the standard operating rule that requires 48 hours of notice for any asset movement. The security officers did not argue. They produced a direct override order signed by the king's private secretary. The document authorized them to remove the pieces immediately. The headdresser stepped aside. The officers spent 9 minutes inside the room, logging the removal of the Tudor crown brooch into their portable terminal before leaving through the staff entrance on Stableyard Road. An unbranded armored vehicle was waiting in the courtyard. The vehicle belonged to the Metropolitan Police Protection Command. The driver did not use the main gates of St. James's Palace. He used the side exit near the Royal Mews to avoid traffic cameras. The route went straight down the A4 heading toward Windsor. The delivery log shows the vehicle arrived at the gates of Adelaide Cottage at exactly 5:15. This removal felt like an institutional ambush to Camilla's remaining allies. They viewed the choice to use security staff as a public declaration of distrust. For years, jewelry movements between households were handled by senior footmen or personal dressers. The switch to security personnel showed that the king was treating the transfer as a matter of state security rather than family logistics. The conflict spilled into the political sphere the following afternoon. The Privy Council held a scheduled meeting at St. James's Palace on June 3rd. Princess Anne arrived 15 minutes before the other members and met with the Lord President of the Council in the private reception room. She quietly validated the jewelry transfer during this brief conversation, stating that consolidating the Bowes Lion assets was necessary for institutional stability. Anne knew about a secret pact made during the coronation planning sessions in 23. Charles and Prince William had held 3 private meetings at Highgrove during that period. They agreed that specific historic heirlooms would be progressively moved to the direct line of succession within 3 years of the accession. This agreement was kept hidden from the wider family to avoid domestic friction during the transition period. The king's refusal to engage in discussion during the dinner showed his absolute commitment to this pact. He has stopped answering internal memos from Camilla's private office regarding wardrobe allocations. All requests must now go through the Central Coordination Desk at Buckingham Palace, which is managed by officials who report directly to the Prince of Wales. The atmosphere among the domestic staff has become highly fractured. The Clarence House dressers have stopped sharing schedule details with the Windsor staff. They believe the Windsor team is actively tracking their wardrobe selections to claim the best pieces first. This lack of communication has led to double bookings for several minor royal loans this month. A senior page discovered another memo in the recycling bin of the King's private study on June 5th. The document was a draft letter addressed to the Crown Equerry regarding the reduction in the number of transport vehicles allocated to Camilla's personal guests for the upcoming winter events. The letter stated that all non-working family members must utilize commercial transport options unless direct security risks exist. This discovery added to the sense of isolation inside Camilla's household. The removal of the diamonds was not an isolated event. It was part of a broader reduction in her institutional footprint. The king is slowly dismantling the parallel structures that she built up over the past 20 years, replacing them with a single, centralized command system that answers to his successor. The true reason for this shift is becoming clearer to senior staff. Charles is ensuring that no loose ends remain before the next major fiscal review. The Treasury Department has requested a clear separation between personal assets and state property by the end of the summer. By moving the stones now, Charles removes any ambiguity about who owns the monarchy's core symbols. The Tudor crown brooch is now locked inside a digital safe at Adelaide Cottage. It sits alongside the files for the other 2 pieces removed from the Windsor vaults. Catherine's team has already updated her official appearance calendar to include the brooch for a high-profile event later this month. The shift is complete, and the balance of power has left Clarence House for good. The Edinburgh audit and the 1953 ledger. An old black leather ledger lay flat on the green baize desk inside the Royal Library at Windsor on June 8th. The spine was cracked and the gilt lettering read, "The Coronation Trust Allocations, 1953. The independent legal auditor from Edinburgh, Alistair McPherson, turned to page 42. He used a small bone folder to smooth the creased vellum, while a junior archivist stood behind his left shoulder, holding a pair of white cotton gloves. McPherson was checking the column that listed the private personal property of King George VI. The 19th century ledger had 34 entries in that specific column. Each entry had a corresponding handwritten cross-reference code in blue ink. These codes pointed directly to a series of private bank vaults in Edinburgh. The records showed that a portion of the family wealth was deliberately moved away from London immediately after the death of George VI. The family wanted to keep these specific assets outside the jurisdiction of the newly elected government's fiscal inspectors. The tension returned when McPherson reached the entry for the Hesse ribbon bow brooch. The ledger note from 1953 stated that this item was held in a secondary trust for the sovereign's direct line. A red pencil mark had been drawn through that original note in November of 2005. A tiny handwritten initial C was written in the margin next to the erasure. Worse, McPherson uncovered a larger discrepancy by 4 o'clock. A matching set of diamond drop earrings from the same collection was entirely missing from the vault. The King's private secretary arrived at the library to view this specific file page. He took a digital photograph of the penciled initial and sent it directly to the King's personal legal counsel. The legal team had been searching for the original authorization document for 3 weeks. They had checked the central registry at Buckingham Palace twice without finding any record of the change. The discovery in the library proved that the modification was handled privately, without formal institutional oversight. This discovery changed the nature of the entire asset review. The king realized that several minor pieces in Camilla's daily collection lacked a secure legal foundation. If a public audit occurred, the palace could face difficult questions about asset registration. Charles ordered Macpherson to extend his stay at Windsor for another 4 days, instructing him to verify every entry that carried a similar red pencil mark. The auditor's work created an immediate reaction from the second floor of the castle. Camilla's private treasurer sent an email to the archive department at 2 o'clock. The message requested immediate access to the 1953 ledger for a routine inventory check. The department head had to deny the request, citing the king's explicit directive that restricted the volume to the active audit team. The location of these missing earrings remains the central mystery of the current audit. The 19th century tracking code suggests they were never sold or modified. They simply vanished from the official ledger system during a period of massive family restructuring. The audit team has requested the private appointment diaries of the late Queen's former treasurer to find out who had access to the Kensington storage vaults during that specific week in 1982. The king received the preliminary audit report at Highgrove on June 10th. He sat on the stone terrace behind the main house while reading the summary pages. His private secretary stood by the balustrade, waiting for his signature on the next phase of the investigation. Charles signed the document without hesitation, authorizing a full expansion of the search to include the private safety deposit boxes held by Coutts Bank in the Strand. This decision marks a significant shift in the king's approach to family history. For decades, these private arrangements were left undisturbed to avoid internal conflict. The current medical reports have changed that calculation. Charles is moving through the family archives with a systematic focus that has surprised even his oldest advisors. He wants the legal definition of every major asset finalized before the autumn parliamentary session begins. The news of the expanded search reached Prince William at Kensington Palace on June 11th. His personal solicitor met him at the Stable Yard office at noon. They spent 40 minutes reviewing the potential impact of the Edinburgh audit on the Duchy of Cornwall assets. William's team expressed absolute support for the king's aggressive approach, viewing the cleanup of these old trusts as a necessary step to protect the crown's future financial stability. The immediate casualty of this process has been the daily relationship between the two main households. The shared administrative calendars have been suspended for the rest of the summer. The staff at Clarence House no longer receives advance notice of the king's private travel arrangements. He moves between Highgrove, Windsor, and London, with a minimal security detail and without consulting his spouse's office. A delivery van from a specialist document shredding company arrived at St. James's Palace on June 12th. The vehicle remained in the inner courtyard for 2 hours. Staff saw senior aides from Camilla's office carrying several green canvas bags down the back staircase. The palace security log noted that these bags contained duplicate copies of personal correspondence from the early 2000s. The removal was categorized as routine office maintenance, but the timing raised immediate questions among the Windsor archivists. The Edinburgh auditor left Windsor Castle on June 14th. He carried 3 secure digital drives containing the complete scan of the 1953 ledger. He is scheduled to present his final findings to the King and the Prince of Wales during a joint meeting at Sandringham. The legal circle is closing around the remaining undocumented pieces in the collection. The public will see the physical results of this audit during the upcoming state visit from the European heads of state. The official guest list has been finalized, and the jewelry allocations have been locked into the system. Princess Catherine is scheduled to wear the complete Hesse collection, including the contested ribbon bow brooch. The piece has already been adjusted by the Windsor workshop to match her specific gown requirements. The red pencil marks from 2005 have been permanently overridden by a new sovereign decree, the Sandringham Summit and the missing strand. A cold rain hit the windows of the Long Library at Sandringham House on June 19th. 3 matching green leather armchairs were arranged in a semicircle facing the fireplace. King Charles sat in the center chair with a wool blanket over his knees. Prince William sat to his right, holding a yellow legal pad. The Edinburgh auditor, Alistair Macpherson, stood by a rolling cart containing 3 fresh bundles of legal briefs. He placed a final spreadsheet directly on the low table between the 2 men. The document was titled The Sandringham Annex, Unresolved Claims. It contained a list of 12 specific jewelry items that remained outside the central Windsor vaults. The total estimated value of these unrecovered pieces sat at £4.5 million. Unlike the historic diamonds sent to Adelaide Cottage, these items were primarily pearls and emeralds. They were acquired during the 1970s through private family purchases in the Middle East. The atmosphere grew strained when McPherson pointed to line 7. The entry described a 3-strand natural Basra pearl necklace with a geometric emerald clasp. Queen Elizabeth II had received these pearls as a personal gift during a Gulf tour in 1979. The royal inventory log showed the necklace was moved to Clarence House in April of 2006. It had not been seen in a public photograph since the Royal Ascot meeting in 21. William leaned forward to look at the tracking notes. The spreadsheet indicated that the 3-strand necklace had been altered without a warrant. A London jeweler based in Mayfair had received the piece for restringing in September of 2024. The invoice was billed directly to a private charitable trust managed by Camilla's sister. This trust had no legal authority to handle sovereign heirlooms. The king did not speak for several moments. He picked up his fountain pen and drew a thick black line across the entire row. This gesture signaled an immediate change in strategy. The internal investigation was no longer just about tracking old boxes in the Windsor cellars. It now involved identifying specific third-party vendors who had accepted royal assets without verifying their legal status. A phone call broke the silence at 3 o'clock. The king's private secretary answered the secure line in the adjacent anteroom. He returned 2 minutes later with an update from London. Queen Camilla's private office had just issued an unapproved press advisory regarding her upcoming summer schedule. The advisory stated that she would wear her personal family pearls for the opening of the new medical wing at Chelsea Hospital, a direct public challenge timed to disrupt the Sandringham meeting. William took his pen and wrote a single instruction on his legal pad. He directed the Central Transport Office to freeze the security detail allocations for the Chelsea event. Under current operational rules, no member of the royal family can leave a palace without an authorized protection team from the Metropolitan Police. By delaying the transport clearance, William effectively blocked the trip without issuing a public cancellation notice. The mystery of the Mayfair jeweler was resolved by 4:15. McPherson produced a copy of the workshop ledger from the London firm. The records showed that the 3-strand necklace had not been sold or broken down for raw materials. It had been converted into a 2-strand necklace to fit a smaller neck size. The remaining 3rd strand of loose pearls was currently sitting in a velvet pouch inside a commercial vault in Zurich. The Zurich vault was registered under the name of a private offshore company called Bose Holdings. This company was created in late 24 by a former accountant for the Clarence House household. The discovery provided the exact missing link the king's legal team needed. The asset had been deliberately divided to remove a portion of the value from the official UK registry. The resolution of the pearl mystery immediately opened a much larger question regarding the Sandringham estate itself. While reviewing the Bose Holdings files, McPherson found a secondary legal deed dated October 12, 1965. The deed detailed a private option to lease 300 acres of the Sandringham home farm to an international agricultural syndicate. The signature at the bottom belonged to the late Duke of Edinburgh. This lease option had never been executed, but it remained legally valid. The company listed as the primary stakeholder in that syndicate was recently acquired by the same offshore entity in Zurich. This meant that the group holding the missing 3rd strand of pearls also held a residual legal claim on a significant portion of the king's private estate land. The king stood up from his chair at 5 o'clock and walked to the window. He looked out at the rain hitting the parkland. The legal framework of the royal family's private wealth was far more fragile than he had realized during his years as Prince of Wales. Every stone he moved seemed to uncover another hidden contract or private agreement made by previous generations. He turned back to the room and gave his final directive of the afternoon. He ordered McPherson to draft a formal surrender document for Bose Holdings. The terms were non-negotiable. The offshore company had 72 hours to return the loose pearls to London and invalidate the 1965 lease deed. If they refused, the Treasury would initiate a formal asset seizure under the Sovereign Wealth Act. The meeting ended at 5:30 without a formal statement to the household staff. William left the library through the side door to catch the evening train back to Windsor. He carried the yellow legal pad in his briefcase. The king remained alone in the room with his private secretary. The fire had died down to embers, and the rain continued to hit the glass. The first phase of the estate consolidation was over, but the legal battle for the Sandringham boundary lines had just begun. The diplomatic gala showdown. The grand marble staircase at Buckingham Palace was lined with 40 Coldstream Guards in full-dress uniform on June 23rd. Guests for the annual international diplomatic reception began arriving at 8 o'clock. The scent of fresh lilies filled the picture gallery. Senior courtiers stood near the double doors, holding the official entrance protocol list. Every movement was timed to the second by the master of ceremonies. Princess Catherine appeared at the top of the stairs at 8:20. She wore a midnight blue silk gown with an asymmetric neckline. Pinned firmly to her left shoulder was the Tudor crown brooch. The rare square-cut emerald at its base caught the heavy light from the chandeliers. Beside her, Prince William wore his traditional evening coat with his garter star. The global press photographers at the base of the stairs shifted their lenses instantly. Queen Camilla walked 10 paces behind them. She wore a cream-lace dress with a bare lapel. Her personal jewelry chest had been restricted to pieces from her own family estate. She wore a simple strand of family pearls, but the historic diamonds were entirely absent from her ensemble. The contrast between the two women was immediate and absolute. The palace staff lined up near the pillar room and watched the procession in the total silence. The visual confirmation of the new regime altered the mood of the entire gala. Foreign ambassadors noticed the placement immediately. For 2 decades, Camilla had used the Bose Lion collection to anchor her presence at these state events. Walking into the ballroom without a single piece from the sovereign's private chest signaled a permanent shift in her institutional standing. Her private office staff stood near the diplomatic bar, refusing to mingle with the Windsor team. The true story of the synthetic stone from the Art Deco shield came to light during the midnight reception dinner. The king's personal legal counsel had received the final report from the Geneva workshop on June 22nd. The report confirmed that the central 3-carat stone had been swapped during a private restoration session 2 years ago. The original diamond had been utilized to secure a credit line for a commercial real estate project in London. Charles had used this specific forensic report as his ultimate legal lever. Faced with the documentation of the unauthorized substitution, Camilla's household could not contest the transfer of the remaining collection. The king signed the permanent relocation order without further domestic negotiation. The synthetic stone was removed and a genuine replacement diamond was pulled from the reserve vaults to complete the shield before Catherine received it. The resolution of the diamond fraud immediately opened a new mystery concerning the Queen's private retreat at Ray Mill House. The Geneva files contained a secondary invoice for a massive security upgrade at the Wiltshire property. The invoice was settled using funds drawn directly from the same offshore entity, Bose Holdings. This meant that the private house Camilla still owned was currently being maintained by a corporate structure that held an invalid claim on the Sandringham home farm. William took immediate action during the midnight intermission. He met with the Home Secretary in the Palace Library for 10 minutes. He requested a formal review of the security funding allocated to non-institutional private properties. If the funding for Ray Mill House was tied to undocumented corporate entities, the state protection detail could be withdrawn entirely by the end of the month. The gala ended at 1 in the morning as the last diplomatic cars cleared the courtyard. The diamonds remained with the Princess of Wales, locked into her official inventory for the upcoming autumn tour. Camilla's team left through the garden entrance to avoid the remaining reporters. The visual shift at the staircase had done its work, proving that the future reign was no longer an abstract plan. It was an active, visible reality in the palace halls. The diamonds have shifted sides, and with them, the last remnant of Queen Camilla's institutional leverage has vanished into the Windsor vaults. King Charles has made his final, unappealable choice for the future of the British monarchy. Do you think Charles was right to strip these historic pieces from his wife to protect Catherine's future reign? Or was this an unnecessary public humiliation for a woman who has stood by him for decades? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover what really happens behind the closed palace doors. See you in the next video.